Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is episode number 58 of Pop Culturally Deprived, and today we're going to be talking about The Incredibles on your No Capes podcast. I'm Mandy Kay.
And I'm Matthew Vose.
And today I'm so excited that we are joined by our friend Rachel, who is one of the hosts of the Wonking Out podcast and the Detective, the Doctor, and the Woman podcast. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here discussing this movie with you. I'm a longtime fan of Pop Culturally Deprived. I have been listening since the first episode. Actually, a lot of the movies and shows that Mandy hasn't seen, I came to later. So I have seen them, but I didn't watch them, at the time that they were getting popular. So I'm really enjoying hearing her take on all this stuff, even a few things that I haven't seen.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you.
Can I ask about The Incredibles? When we asked you to come on, you gave us a couple of things you might want to talk about, but this was very high up the list. Did you see this at the theatre? Did you own it? What's your history with The Incredibles?
I don't think I saw it in the theater. There's a slight possibility that I did, but I don't think that I did. For some reason, it's a big popular movie with my family. So if we didn't see it in the theater, somebody must have picked it up soon after, and we watched it, I say most of our family. And it's one that we've returned to. It's actually one of only a handful that my parents own on DVD, which is probably why I thought I owned it on DVD. I don't. But especially my mom doesn't watch a lot of movies, but it's one that she has seen several times and can actually quote. So, I don't know, so it's kind of a special family movie with my family, which I have quite a few siblings, a couple of them are quite a bit younger, but I think everyone in our family has seen this movie several times, and so it's, just one of those movies.
Oh, cool. It's nice to have that extra layer of nostalgia, not just the thing itself, but the circumstances of seeing it and seeing it with people.
Yes, yeah.
Lovely. Mandy, this film is not an old film. It's a genre you kind of like, and it's quite famous as well. So your usual excuses don't work here, I think. How come you've never seen this?
I think, so when this one came out, it was in 2004, I was a senior in college, or I had just graduated college, depending on which half of 2004 it was. And I hadn't yet fully embraced my geekness. And so I didn't know that I liked superheroes at the time. And so I wasn't fully enamored with Pixar yet. And so this movie just was kind of for me. And then as time passed, and obviously I'm super into superheroes now, I don't know why I never went back and watched it. And then, of course, starting last year, I knew I couldn't watch it until we were ready to do it on the show. So I think there are several movies coming up where that's going to be my excuse is, well, the last year I knew I couldn't watch it because we were going to do it for the show.
Okay.
But yeah, it came out during that time, right before I knew that superheroes were a thing I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
When we talked about The Dark Knight, I think, maybe Dark Knight? Yeah, I mentioned how there was this sort of peak of superhero films just after this, and this is one of the few that was successful that wasn't an established superhero or anything before that. So it does stand apart slightly, which I think we'll talk about, but yeah, it's not a mainstream, previously existing comic. It doesn't come with an inbuilt audience.
But it does have a significantly sized audience now, which I think is pretty great.
I don't think I ever really thought of this movie as a superhero movie. I guess maybe I always kind of put it more in the animated Pixar genre. I mean, it is a superhero movie. But if you were saying, Rachel, can you tell me all the superhero movies that came out in the 2000s? I probably would not include this one. But I just don't think of it that way.
That's fair. Bit of history before we get into the discussion. The Incredibles is a 2004 animated superhero film from Pixar Animation Studios, and it was released by Walt Disney Pictures. It was written and directed by Brad Bird, who also played Edna. Starring Craig T. Nelson and Holly Hunter as Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl, the film earned $633 million at the box office against a budget of just $92 million.
Wow.
It was the 5th highest earning movie of the year, putting it ahead of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Wait,
Wow.
seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's impressive.
Like, that's the third in the franchise, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So already had an audience, it already had films behind it, but this outperformed it.
That's incredible.
Pretty good. The Incredibles was heralded critically as well as commercially. Many critics praised it for accomplishing a more mature story within a genre and medium that do not often deliver, both superhero and animated films. The film won the Best Animated Feature and Best Sound Editing at the Academy Awards, whilst also not being nominated for Best Original Screenplay and Best Sound Mixing. It was the 6th feature film produced by Pixar and was the first to heavily feature humans. This was a much more complicated challenge than they had dealt with before, and the director Brad Bird refused to compromise because of the technology. There was an interesting story where in Monsters, Inc. before this, they changed the hairstyle Boo was going to have because the bunches were much easier to animate. But he refused to do that with Violet.
Okay.
So that's why Violet's hair was one of the last things they did for the film, apparently.
Huh.
As well as this, the film was longer, it featured more locations, and had special effects they had previously avoided, like smoke, steam, and explosions. Later this year, The Incredibles 2, the long-awaited sequel, will be released.
Very cool.
I'm really excited about the sequel.
I am excited about the sequel now, too. So,
Yeah. I was like, cool, they've been talking about it for years. Like, I feel like several years ago, there was, they're doing Incredibles 2. It's like, well, it's an animated movie. How long can it take? Well, a few years.
long damn time.
Apparently. So I'm like, okay.
yeah. Well, if you haven't seen The Incredibles, it is what I call a superhero movie. And it's basically about a world where superheroes have essentially been banished, and Mr. Incredible has grown bored of his quote-unquote normal life. When he begins to moonlight as a superhero again, he runs into trouble and must be rescued by his family. Or we can use IMDb's description. A family of undercover superheroes, while trying to live the quiet suburban life, are forced into action to save the world. That description just doesn't quite really cover the movie for me, but
No, yeah, it's not quite on point, is it?
No, not really. So, Rachel, you said you thought you owned the DVD, but you didn't have it. So how did you end up watching this movie?
I rented it on Amazon. I almost bought it on Amazon, but I decided to wait.
Okay.
So I rented it.
Yeah, I also rented it on Amazon. It's not available on any of the subscription streaming services, which was surprising to me because I thought most of the Disney movies were on Netflix.
A lot of them are, except that contract is ending and they're pulling all their stuff.
Oh,
So
of course.
it might have been streaming at one point, but they didn't renew the contract because they're going to try to launch their own. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, Disney have got their own one now, so.
Okay.
Yay.
What about you, Matthew? How did you watch it?
It's on Sky Cinema over here. They are currently doing... I've talked previously how they do special edition channels every so often. They now have 2 special edition channels this month. They are doing Sky Cinema Heroes and Sky Cinema Villains.
Oh, nice.
This was on the Heroes one. I mean, there's not too much difference between the films on either, but I think it's like, okay, so Dark Knight is more about the villains, so it goes on the Villains channel.
Oh.
Batman Begins goes on the Heroes channel.
Okay.
Huh.
I mean, no one watches live TV anyway, so.
That's fair.
Oh, that's fancy. Separate,
Yeah.
special channels. You have all the fancy stuff over there.
Yeah, you get to watch a lot of stuff on Sky Cinema, and like I kind of wish we had Sky Cinema here.
Yeah, it's the goods. I mean, it's like stuff that we can get, but you have, if you have Stars, and if you have HBO, and if you have Prime and Netflix and Hulu,
Right.
But then we still couldn't get this. So.
Yeah, the market's not segmented the way that your like cable market is. So
yeah,
it's basically Sky, and even if you go for one of the other companies like Virgin Media, you still get Sky Cinema on them. You just don't quite have the selection of channels.
Maybe we should just all move to the UK just for the TV.
I'm thinking so.
I mean, I do pay a ton for it, but like I've just gone all in with Sky, so I've got the Sky broadband, the Sky phone, the Sky thing, so it's all like one big bundle.
Right.
Easy.
Okay.
They got you.
And the rugby season's about to start again, so I'm about to add on Sky Sports too. The season stops in October, so I just stopped that bit of the subscription. Like, okay, I can save like £10 a month. It's worth it. Mandy, did you have any expectations for this?
Well, I did, because I thought I knew what this movie was about. I thought that this was a movie about a superhero family doing superhero things. That's not what this movie is about.
No.
Like, the last 20 minutes of this movie is about that, but the rest of it is not. So I didn't get what I expected. That doesn't mean it was bad. It was just different. Does that make sense?
It does indeed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I get that.
Okay. I mentioned the director and writer Brad Bird, and then it's also got Craig T. Nelson, Holly Hunter, and the villain syndrome is Jason Lee. Have you got any experience of them in cinema before?
I do find it interesting that you didn't include Samuel L. Jackson in that list. I mean, I know Frozone wasn't a huge character, but he's a huge actor.
Yeah. That's stunt casting, though.
Yeah. I had never even heard the name Brad Bird before this.
Okay.
But I have seen Ratatouille, which he apparently wrote and directed. Craig T. Nelson, I have always known who he is because he was Coach on Coach.
Mm-hmm.
And he was also Zeke Braverman on Parenthood, which is a television show I absolutely adored. And then he's been in some really great movies. The Family Stone is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yes.
And he is the father of that family. He was also the father, Ryan Reynolds' father, in The Proposal. And he was apparently also in Troop Beverly Hills. So he's been kind of around a lot. And he's just one of those people that he's always Coached to me, even though I see him in all these other things.
Right.
Holly Hunter is the one that surprised me the most, because when I looked at her filmography, there were only 2 things that I've actually seen her in. But I know who she is. I've always known who she is, and I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense to me. So she was in the serial killer movie like way back when called Copycat, which is a really, really good movie that I forgot existed until I saw it in her filmography. And then she was the senator in Batman vs. Superman. And that's kind of all I've ever seen her in. So I have no idea why she's so familiar to me. I mean, I know she did that television show on like TNT called Saving Grace, but I never watched it. I just always saw the promos for it.
That was a good show. I really liked that show.
Well, I always wanted to watch it, but yeah, it's hard when you don't have cable. So
she was in that. Is it Raising Arizona? Was that what with?
She was in Raising Arizona,
yes.
but I have not seen it.
I really enjoyed that movie. I watched it a million years ago.
That one's got Nicolas Cage in it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so
it's young Nicolas Cage. If that means anything, I really liked it. I thought it was really good.
Okay. And then Jason Lee, he's been in all of the Kevin Smith movies, and I have seen several of the Kevin Smith movies, surprisingly enough. Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Dogma. I kind of quit after that. I don't remember him being in Clerks, but I could be wrong. And then he was on...
No, I don't think he is.
He was on the sitcom My Name is Earl, which I never actually watched, but I was always super familiar with it because, I mean, it came on regular primetime TV. I was in high school. It was making fun of rednecks. My family's a family of rednecks, so I just kind of was aware. So he's always been interesting to me, even if he did kind of go a little bit crazy at some point, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's one of those guys that, like, I don't recognize the name, but then I see him, I'm like, oh yeah, he was in all this stuff.
Yeah. So I know he's done the new Chipmunk movies, which I have not seen.
Oh yeah.
So I may watch them one day.
Yeah, I can't think I've got anything else to add for his. Holly Hunter, we've got at least one more film of hers on the list. Have you seen A Life Less Ordinary?
No. I clicked on it when I was looking at her filmography because I was like, that sounds familiar. And then I didn't read anything about it. I just looked at the movie poster, and it's like, I've never seen this before. So I just assume I probably haven't seen it. It was Cameron Diaz and Ewan McGregor?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I've seen that.
I would put it on the list. It's really good.
Yeah, that is a solid film.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be watching that later in the year for the Movie Mentions podcast. So we might try and tie them together.
Yeah.
She also, last year, she was in The Big Sick, which is one of the Oscar-nominated movies.
Yes, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Ooh, possibly one for SF Pop, because obviously it's got a whole Carolina thing going on with it.
Yeah, I didn't know that, so okay.
I didn't know that either.
The writer, Emily Gordon, who wrote it, is from North Carolina. She's from, like, down the road from you.
Okay. Yeah. I had no idea. Cool.
So Brad Bird, interesting. He did The Iron Giant. He was writer and director of The Iron Giant.
I haven't seen The Iron Giant.
Okay. That's another one for the list. And he did the 4th Mission Impossible film.
Literally the only movie that I had seen out of his filmography was Ratatouille. Literally. Okay. So I don't think I saw any of the Mission Impossibles after 3.
Okay. He did the one after that, which is where they start getting better again.
You lasted longer than me. I think I saw the second one. I don't actually remember, but people tell me that I did, so I'm like, okay, sure.
All right.
Yeah, that's the bad one. Okay. And Pixar films in general, this, as I say, this is the 6th one. Have you seen all of them now? Have you seen some of them?
I have not seen all of them. I have not seen Toy Story 2 or 3. I have seen WALL-E, the first Toy Story, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, Finding Dory, Cars 1. I have not seen 2 or 3. Ratatouille, Up, and Brave. So, okay. I mean, that's a fair showing of Pixar movies that I've seen.
It is.
That's good. Yeah. I think the only one I've missed so far is Monsters University, which I don't really want to see.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one either.
I'm good not seeing
bad.
it.
Toy Story 2 is really good, though.
See, I think I started watching Toy Story 2, and I just wasn't into it, and so I never finished it. But then Toy Story 3 came out, and everybody talked about how amazing it was, and I really wanted to see it. But if you guys have listened to the show at all, you know I can't watch Toy Story 3 without watching Toy Story 2. So I just haven't seen any of it yet.
Okay. Toy Story 2's got Joan Cusack in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, that might be enough just to get me to sit through it. All right.
It should be.
Okay, we are here to talk about The Incredibles. I'll stop trying to talk about other films. Mandy, did you enjoy The Incredibles?
I did. That's all I got. Okay. I did.
It's not super effusive.
I have thoughts that we'll talk about.
Go on. Okay,
yeah,
we'll do you have a main thought?
Well, I think probably the primary thought is just when you go into a movie expecting one thing and you get something different, it does affect how much you enjoy it. But I did actually enjoy it. And I tried to separate what it was from what I thought it was. I got hung up a little bit on this movie is actually really, really dark for a Pixar movie. And then I say that, and then I think about things like Up, and the whole first 90 seconds of Up, like you're blubbering like a baby because it's about a woman who dies, you know. But then the rest of it is happy and fun and nice. And this one was just kind of super dark all the way through. Opening a Pixar movie with machine gun fire was completely unexpected. And then you have things like Mr. Incredible going through Syndrome's database and realizing he's murdered all of the superheroes. Like, that's just really dark when you've got like 6 and 7-year-olds watching this. Although I imagine they probably don't care. They're just like, yeah, death, superheroes. But I was just having a little bit of a hard time with it.
Hail Satan. Because kids, am I right?
Exactly.
Kids with their iPods and
Yeah, so I mean, the darkness of it kind of threw me out a few times, and that's really where my complicated feelings get. But it had a lot of really good stuff in it. Like the family stuff was really nice, and it was pretty. I mean, it was realistic, you know, and it made me happy and it gave me warm fuzzies. But then it made me sad sometimes. So, I mean, it's just a little bit complicated, I think.
It's interesting coming off us saying at the beginning about how much this is a superhero movie or an animated movie, because I know I said I was going to stop comparing this to other films and talk about other movies, but I was lying. This is basically a James Bond film. stylistically, the way the movie goes through its set pieces and its sequences, with the exception of that last 20 minutes, like once, you know, they get off the island and go and take on the robot, up to that point, it is a James Bond film. You
are absolutely right. I didn't even think about that, but you are absolutely right. Everything down to, I mean, from the first time we see him, he's wearing a tuxedo.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a totally different way to look at it. Because I guess, like, when Mandy was saying it's really dark, my first thought was, well, to me, it's kind of classic distinction between, especially, I'd say this was the 6th Pixar movie? Yeah. This is like, I'd say in the first 10 especially, there was this big, you know, Pixar does these things and Disney does these other things, and Disney does the feel-good, you know, animation for kids, and Pixar does animation that's got more depth and more layers, and there's more going on in the story. But then when you add the James Bond elements, that's like a whole nother. But it's true. I totally agree.
And it's really interesting because I don't think any other superhero film has done it in that way. And I wonder if it's because this film does it so well, you just end up looking like you're aping on The Incredibles. Like, could Marvel do it in this way? Well, no, we'd end up comparing it. But even down to the fact we get all the pieces of the plan, but we don't know how they fit together until he's taken prisoner and gets the plan explained to him. It's got all the core tropes going on with it. There was an interesting piece that I read that apparently the Fantastic Four movie that came out the year after this had to have significant rewrites because of how similar it was to The Incredibles.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which, the Incredibles family is effectively the Fantastic Four, just with a new name.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think there was the thing about comparing this to Watchmen.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think Brad Bird hadn't read anything. But yeah, there is a lot of this that is taking that same idea of what if superheroes actually existed, and then what if there were problems with them.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I mean, I've read the Watchmen graphic novel, but I think I read it after the movie came out. Okay. And I can't remember when the movie came out, but I think I saw it in theaters.
I feel like 2010?
Yeah,
it was definitely later, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it was later. And I mean, I don't remember watching Watchmen and going, oh, this is like The Incredibles. But this watch through, some of that just kind of jumped out at me. I was like, oh, this is really, you know, which is not, you know, it's an idea that's come up in different superhero comics and movies, but jumped out at me this time.
Well, here's a question for you guys. And I think this has come up on the show before, but I have not seen Watchmen. Is it worth putting on the list, or at least worth me watching? Okay, your silence speaks volumes. Got it. Okay.
I want to say yes, but I don't want anyone to write at me for liking a Zack Snyder film.
Can I be honest? The only reason I really want to see it is because Jeffrey Dean Morgan is in it.
Okay.
That might be reason enough for me to actually watch it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say watch it, because I think, I mean, and, you know, in my perspective, I read the graphic novel after the movie. Yes, it's a Zack Snyder film, but, you know, at the time...
Well, knowing that it's a Zack Snyder film kind of makes me back off a little bit, because I've discovered that his movies don't really make sense.
Yeah, there's some issues. I enjoyed it, like, just kind of as its own thing.
All right.
And then, you know, I thought the graphic novel was pretty decent. You know, I'm not a big consumer of comic book superheroes, right. But so, you know, I don't have like all that. I'm not going to call it baggage, but I don't have all that history with, you know, superheroes and the comic book superheroes that I know a lot of people do. Not in a bad way. But, you know.
Oh, nerds, am I right?
Like, you know, oh my gosh, you guys. I prefer, my comic books, you know, their own thing. But
I think it's a really good adaptation of something that is almost impossible to adapt, because the comic is not as traditionally accessible. Just lots of panels and lots of stuff that goes through. There is heavily actual written sections, and then you have to pay attention to the way they're mirroring the pages sometimes, and it's got a lot more going on with it. It's very hard to turn that into a movie, a cinematic event, but he does it very, very well, and it is a very good story that does a lot of very interesting things. So yes, I'd recommend it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I like that my superhero education is expanding as a result of this podcast. Beyond the MCU. I mean, because really the MCU is my whole experience of superheroes. And so, you know, watching the Christopher Nolan Batmans and watching some of the Zack Snyder films that we've done recently, which were actually for your other show, Across the Arrowverse, and now doing The Incredibles, it's nice to kind of see the differences between all of these different adaptations, but also the similarities.
Hmm.
And I think that's
Yeah.
it's fun. It's fun. So I am enjoying this experience of learning more about superheroes.
Good, because it should be enjoyable. I mean, that's my perspective. You know, if it's not fun, then just don't. Like, it's okay to say that's not my thing, and I really didn't enjoy it. But if you're, just enjoy it for itself, I guess. Is the way that I look at it.
So the Incredibles, like I say, it works really well as a James Bond film featuring superheroes. But it does do a lot of very good superhero work. It avoids us having to do origin stories, which is good because even in 2004, that was a very, very standard way of telling a superhero story. There was some interesting stuff as you went through in your notes, Mandy, talking about you weren't sure what their powers were or who was... I don't know how to say, but who was doing what the connections between everyone was. Mm-hmm. It almost ends up not mattering, which I think is one of its strengths, but did that throw you out of the film when you got to the superhero stuff?
No, I think it was just early on in the film, and because they didn't do an origin story, they just kind of dropped you in the middle of these people's lives. At the beginning, I was questioning it, but they showed us. They told us. I figured out what Mr. Incredible could do relatively quickly without them having to explicitly say he has super strength and he's basically invulnerable. And so I think they did a really good job of introducing these characters and their powers to us without doing an origin story, which was pretty fantastic. I also really, really, really liked how... I legitimately thought at the beginning that Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible were fighting each other over who was going to get to be the hero. And then it turns out they're getting married. I super cracked up at that. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it's a bit of a slow burn, the whole prologue, because I think it's 10, 15 minutes worth. Mm-hmm. But like you say, introducing you to, okay, these are his powers and here's the thing. But there's also a lot of plotting going in there. Both the large-scale stuff about Buddy, but also just her talking to him about them being a family together and working together and so on.
Right.
It's already setting up some of the major themes they're going to be working on. But one of the things I love about this film is the way it does that plotting of giving you a piece early on that they're then going to deliver on much later. I mean... It's not much later that he saves the guy jumping off the building and then that person sues him and that then starts the downfall of the superheroes. But it's nice plotting because it's just a throwaway moment almost. And he even says, I'm sure you'll get over it when the guy says he's hurt. And you then get the whole story with Buddy and Bon Voyage. But that's actually the most important thing we're seeing. It's nicely downplayed, but you're still taking it in without it being heavy exposition.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to point out what he actually said because it
Go on.
stuck out to me enough that I wrote it down because I loved it. When the guy who's going to commit suicide, when he saved him and then he starts complaining, Mr. Incredible says, "With counseling, I think you'll come to forgive me."
Yeah, because he said, I think you broke something.
Yeah, it cracked me up. And I thought, wow, one, that's a really deep line for a Pixar movie that's marketed at kids. And two... it's just funny, too. I liked it. I think there were a lot of lines like that in this movie that stick out to me. So I think the writing was pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the dialogue and the writing, I think, is one thing every time I watch it, like something, jumps out at me. And I'm like, this was, 2004, what a lot of people consider, a quote unquote kids movie. And there was... the writing and the dialogue and the delivery is just, it's so well done, which is probably one of the reasons that this movie has such, it's so popular. Like everybody has seen this movie. people enjoy it. Like most people that have, I don't know anyone who's seen The Incredibles that is like, yeah, I totally hated that movie and I would never watch it again. Even if it's not their, most favorite movie in the world, I think most people have a positive experience. Because I think some of those little things, like the dialogue and the writing, that just kind of make it an altogether solid movie.
Yeah, and with the exception of the pure superhero stuff, particularly all the syndrome buddy stuff, it's very honest writing. It's her dealing with her kids and giving them support or telling them, no, this is why we're not doing, why we're not letting you compete, because you're a bit of a show off. And then when we finally see it, when we finally get to that moment at the end and he's allowed to compete, yeah, he's a bit of a show off.
Yeah.
But it's her work with the family is all, it's very true and very realistic. You can feel it. It doesn't get bogged down into either doing the superhero conventions or coming up with gobbledygook jargon. I don't think anyone uses the phrase speedster in this. He just runs fast.
No.
That's all we need to say.
Yes.
Yeah, it's true.
And then the plotting as it goes on, it just does so much clever work with Edna's whole thing about the capes, and then that's what ends up happening to Buddy. That's the final thing that gets him, and it's like, yes, we can see her point. When Jack has the young babysitter, and she says, I will phone a service, I'll get someone in, I will, I'm not comfortable with this, but I'll pay you for your time. And then the thing of, he turns up pretending to be that service, and that's how he gets into Jack. I love the way the film sets up things and everything comes together. There's not a moment that's wasted. There's no B plot that doesn't actually impact the other plots around it.
Right.
There's no, quirky sidekick who is around for laughs and doesn't really do anything.
Well, you can almost argue that Frozen fits that.
Yeah. You see, I was thinking of it from the villain's perspective, but yeah, he has no arc particularly.
I mean, that doesn't mean he's not fantastic, and he doesn't have one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. But he didn't really do anything other than, be somebody for Bob. Bob, is that his name? Is that Mr. Incredible's name? For Bob to talk to.
Bob.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, is the reason to have him in there so there is a link both with the old superhero world and to do that link where Mirage is actually chasing Frozone but sees Mr. Incredible.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's just so well done.
Mm.
That he is this kind of side character, but he is fleshed out enough. I think that, and I've seen, they're probably Tumblr posts, with that scene of Frozone, at home, and everyone's always just like, what, we need a Frozone movie. I want to know more about this guy and his family and his wife and all this stuff, even though like his actual on-screen time is very, very low.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that until Matthew was just talking about how everything fits together, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, I guess there is this one character, but you don't feel that while you're watching it, right. Which I think is a mark of a really well-written screenplay. Because he did serve a purpose, it was just a very small purpose. Yeah,
because what we normally see in some of the older superhero films, to be honest, but usually the villain has a sidekick who is bumbling or quippy or something, who serves no real purpose but adds a bit of levity. So there's no one like that. But you are absolutely right. From the hero's perspective, yeah, there is someone.
It's interesting, yeah.
So you mentioning his name there reminded me that, of course, he's called Bob Parr. And Parr is the average score for something.
Yes.
So it absolutely fits in with this whole thing of him hating the mediocrity. And all the way through, it's about being exceptional if you're exceptional. And Buddy wanting to be more than he actually is. Mm-hmm. But Bob doesn't want to share, doesn't want to work with someone like that. So that's what creates the whole thing at the end. But I love the constant raging against, it's terrible being mediocre. You have to strive and you have to be as good as you can be. And he hates the fact he's literally in a grey office working in a grey suit with grey people around him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so here's a question. Do you think, and maybe I was just misinterpreting or I wasn't paying enough attention since it was just my first watch through, do you really think that he didn't want to work with Buddy because he wanted to work alone, that he wanted to keep all of the spotlight and hero-ness, whatever that word is, to himself? Or was it because he knew Buddy didn't have abilities and he was trying to keep him safe? Because I thought it was more of the latter, but it sounds like you're saying the first bit.
I think there's definitely some of the latter. I guess I've always seen it more as he wants to keep him safe. He also just doesn't think it's a good idea for someone who doesn't have powers to be jumping in. And then, I think there's, as part of the safety thing, I think he doesn't want the responsibility. I think he doesn't want to have to worry about somebody else. Like, I guess I always saw it less as a spotlight sharing and more of I don't want to have to worry about anything else.
Right, okay.
Which I guess is, yes, that's selfish, but also just kind of, this is the way I do things and that's what I'm used to and I don't want to change it.
But it's not necessarily I'm the hero and I have to be the hero by myself.
I haven't really ever read it that way.
Okay. I don't think I've ever applied this much thought to it. But it ties into the whole thing of he doesn't feel his identity as the father, the part of the family unit, is the fit for him. He is Mr. Incredible. He stands alone and does his own thing. So he doesn't want to share. That might not be the right way of saying it, but he doesn't want to work with someone else because he is on his own doing his thing.
Okay.
And saying he wants to be in the spotlight, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's the way he's thinking of it in a fame perspective, but his identity is all about, I am this person, this idol, and I don't want to be part of a team.
Yeah.
And it's learning that certainly the big, not twist at the end, but the denouement of it, of him learning to be part of the team and that other people can support him because he's not strong enough without them.
Right. Which actually... and I promise not to make a huge tangent out of this, but specifically, that's the thing that started to bother me about the Arrow television show, mm-hmm. because we had what I felt was a pretty natural progression of Oliver Queen, just learning to work with the team. Mm-hmm. He's like, I work alone, and I to protect people. I don't want anyone else dragged into my crap. But then he acquiesces to having a team, and he starts to work with people. And that was good. And then I started to have issues when, one season they were like, just kidding. He is now, reverted and doesn't want his stuff to bounce back on other people and starts doing stuff by himself and doesn't want to work with the team and has to work alone. And they did that a couple times in Arrow. And I just kind of went, it was very tiring for me personally. But I think the whole, I work alone and not a team, I think it's a good story as long as there's natural progression. As in this movie, at the end, he realizes that he is better in the team, working with the family, and that's a strength, not a weakness. So it's well done in this instance.
Yeah, and particularly here, because everyone's strengths support each other very well. And strengths both in their superpowers, but the ability to work together. The final piece of her not firing the final shot until the last moment because she wants to get it right. But there's no point where he explains to her exactly what's happening. She sees what he's setting up, right. She gets it, she then lines up the shot.
Yes. Yeah.
So they work together very well. And yeah, Arrow wants to do that story again and again and again. To the extent this season it's just gone a bit silly with the whole team disintegrating. So
yeah, that's why I haven't watched any of this season, because I had to take a break.
Yeah.
I've been listening to your podcast, but I'm not watching this right now. I cannot.
Yeah, it might be the one we'd sacrifice if we had to, which we're not going to. This might be the first time in several years I'm going to make Catherine watch a whole season of Arrow. She normally taps out halfway through, no, you can just carry on.
Well, props to her.
Yeah, it's me being mean, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. Well.
But yes, his identity is very much about being Mr. Incredible. And then he gets absolutely depressed and miserable when he can't do that. And you see how when he gets to do the whole moonlighting thing, he becomes happy and he becomes a playful husband, and they have lots of fun indoor time when the kids are off at school and so on. Like the film, a little
Yeah.
heavy-handed, but it's very clear. Like, okay, when he gets to be the person he identifies as, he is very, very happy, and that's a good message. Right. Just it comes with a lot of secrets.
Yeah, and I think I put a note in the doc that said Bob should have known better and that was specifically, with like all the secrets. And, you get to do, someone hands him an opportunity to be that person that he most identifies with. So he takes it and ignores the fact that he's, lying to his wife for however many months, because it's like choosing to have that identity over the identity of the husband who's taking care of his family. I mean, while at the same time saying, yes, I'm making all this money, so I'm quote unquote taking care of the family, but he's, not taking care of his relationship with his wife. That's, there's a negative, to the point where she thinks that maybe he's having an extramarital affair. The things that you sacrifice or choose to sacrifice to have the identity of Mr. Incredible again.
Yeah, and she's not suspicious about it. So they're not making it the tropey suspicious wife, her indoors.
Right.
The very small moment of where she realizes he's never really hoovered his den. So she then goes in and she's hoovering and it's clearly sucking up all this stuff, which is just a great little moment. But that then leads her to be like, oh, why is his suit damaged? And I think at some point she then finds the hair shortly after that. Mm-hmm. So they take you along those steps of where she's getting to that point. But they work very hard to make sure it is a misunderstanding. Right,
which I really appreciate. Because not just because it's a kid's movie, but, I'm so over false conflict.
Yes.
Yeah. Ugh. Like, even in, like, movies and shows that I like, and I'm like, oh, like, I will audibly sigh, and, I'll just be like, oh, no.
Just freaking talk to each other.
I don't want to do this. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. All right, well, are we ready to talk about our favorite bits? Because we're kind of moving into gushing about how well the writing is.
I think so. Mandy, do you have any favorites?
I think I have more favorites than both of y'all combined, which is weird since I didn't come out and say, oh my God, I love this movie. But I was going back through my notes and I was just like, oh yeah, that's so good. Oh yeah, that's so good. Y'all, Edna is the best character I've ever seen in a movie ever.
Yes.
And I knew, Rachel, you knew I was watching this movie because as soon as she came on and she started her no capes tirade, I posted the GIF on Twitter. And you immediately responded to it.
Yes. And that's, I mean, like you said, we don't have as many, because that is like the Edna and the no capes is my personal biggest favorite moment of the movie. And like I mentioned, it's kind of, a family favorite. And my mom actually, like, she will occasionally pop off with, no capes. Like, we'll be having a conversation and she'll just say that. And it makes me, it's funny because it's a good part of the movie. And it's hilarious because my mom is not that movie quoting person.
Okay.
Like, she's like, when we were kids and we'd watch movies with our dad, Mom would sometimes come in like halfway through and be like, sewing, knitting, something, in and out, keeping busy. It's very rare for her, especially when I was younger, to sit down and watch a whole movie all the way through. So if we make a reference or a movie reference, most of the time she's like, she doesn't know what that is. She doesn't get it. That's just not the way that she engages with film. So when she does, it's just like, it's a big deal. And actually a few years ago, she had a rather milestone birthday and I found a shirt. I think it was a Ripped Apparel or T-Fury, one of those T-shirt of the day mashup shirts. And it was Edna and it said, "Not all heroes wear capes."
Oh, that's fantastic.
And we got it for her birthday and she like she lit up. She just loved it. Like, I buy those, shirts from those sites for my brothers and my dad a lot for Christmas and birthdays. Mm. But, I found one that my mom would get and she liked and she loved it. And she's like I said, it's just a big deal. So that's another reason that the Edna No Capes like has an extra. It's an extra big deal to me, I think. But it is just, it's a classic line. It's just so.
She kind of reminded me of the Frau from the Austin Power movies. Do you guys know who I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
just the way she was throwing her head back and shouting and like similar accent. And I looked it up to see if they were the same person, and then I was like, oh, that's a dude.
Yeah, it's a dude.
Yeah, that's Brad Bird.
That is Brad Bird. Yeah.
Yeah. She also reminds me, and it's probably more like a physical than the way that she acts, of Hetty on NCIS Los Angeles.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Well, she's a diminutive older woman with like the same haircut.
Okay.
and she's always, I think she has glasses, and she's always like popping up. Like people will be talking, and then they're like, "Oh my god, she's behind me!" Like she just like creeps around all the time.
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. I just looked her up, and I don't recognize the character, but I recognize the actress.
Yeah,
Henrietta Lange.
Yes,
I guess that's Hetty.
Henrietta Lange.
Played by Linda Hunt.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
that's her.
Yeah,
yes,
she looks like Linda.
Yes,
Hunt.
absolutely. Side note, unrelated to the podcast, Rachel, I am wearing my Bored Meow T-shirt today. Just so you know.
That makes me so happy.
Okay, sorry, Matthew. Continue.
I love, for Edna, I love her moment of reminding Elastigirl who she is, and she should go and fight for Bob and show him what he's missing out on. Because again, it's this thing of identity. She's forgotten what being Elastigirl is because she has now just completely become Helen Parr. And when she goes and becomes Elastigirl again, she is like so in charge of the plane and the children and taking charge and coming up with strategies and ideas and telling people to stop panicking. She finds herself again. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And, just the visual of Edna with, it's just like a rolled up, paper. And she's standing on the table and she's like beating her with it.
Yeah. Sort of tapping her like a naughty dog.
Yeah. She's like, no, remember who you are. She's like, flailing around. And that whole Edna and all the things that she does just is perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's just,
I really like how subtle they showed the relationship that they have, because clearly Edna is very close to this family because it's been 15 years since she's made suits for them, but she knows all of the children, all of the children's abilities. She's clearly been a part of their family. And I think that's fantastic. Yeah,
there's one line just as Helen goes off and she says, "And call me when you get back, darling. I love our catch-ups."
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on from the Edna love, which we could probably go on and on and on about. I really liked Violet and Dash. Violet being afraid, I guess, and not being able to use her power. But as soon as she needed it to save her brother, like that force field was there. And then Dash and Violet work together with her force field, and they're basically running through the forest surrounded by this force field ball. And watching them together when, they hate each other, but they love each other. It was just fantastic.
Proper siblings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then Dash's laugh when he figured out he could run on water was one of the most adorable things I have ever heard.
Yeah.
And it just made me laugh.
I always like to think that's a callback to Bob's laugh when he hurts his back fighting the robot the first time. And the robot ends up like stretching him and pulling him and fixes his back, because Bob has a similar laugh where he's like, "Oh my god, I've got my power. I can now beat you."
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I thought Dash using his power, which, including the running on the water, I think were some of the more what I would call classic like comic booky moments. Like the laughing, he's like, "Ha ha!" That's so to me, like that's like comic book, aha. And the running on water and the force field. And I think especially like you were saying, they hate each other but they love each other, which is your classic siblings. But then them being able to use their powers and specifically, towards a common goal, I think, is a good connection for them, which is, again, kind of a sibling thing. I mean, because there's, people saying like, oh, well, siblings are, that's your sibling, so you have to, you have to get along with them. You have to love them. And I'm like, well, that's not enough. I mean, even in a regular sibling relationship, just because they're my sibling. I mean, if they're a totally, terrible person, doesn't mean I have to like them. But I think a lot of, quote unquote, normal sibling relationships, often, if you have a sibling that you're particularly close to, it's because of there is something else that you connect with. Maybe you both like the same books or the same television show, or just, a common interest aside from you're my sibling and I have to live with you. And I felt like they already had their powers, obviously, but they weren't supposed to be using them. So that wasn't a point of connection in their relationship until, this situation where they're, they had to work together and they were both kind of exploring what their abilities were and then using them together.
Right.
Which I think, strengthened their sibling relationship.
Yeah, it's really clever because the powers are so disparate, but they find a way to link them together somehow and to make them useful to each other. But you wouldn't say, oh, this girl who can disappear and make force fields, and this guy who can run really fast. There doesn't seem to be a link there. It's a good bit of work to get to that point. The hamster ball.
Yeah.
Okay, my last one is a very, very close second as far as favorite scene from the movie. I mean, because Edna was really up there, but Frozone looking for his super suit that his wife had hidden was incredible. He's saying stuff like, you tell me where my suit is, woman. We're talking about the greater good. And she says, greater good? I am your wife. I'm the greatest good you're ever going to get. And I was cracking up. It was amazing. Like, I immediately went and looked for it on YouTube and watched it again.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that makes that scene so great is you never see her.
Yeah.
You only hear her from the other room.
Yeah.
And he's, he's got this, there's this big glass window. He sees, destructive robot go walking past and he's like, oh my gosh, it's my turn. I get to do the thing. I get to save the world.
But he doesn't have a super suit.
But his super suit, and he's like, where is my super suit? Why do you want to know?
If they made a Frozone film, would you want to see her or keep her off screen for the whole thing?
I would like to not see her for the first half hour.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I would want to see her, but I think they can keep this going for a little while before you get to the point of, okay, now they're just hiding the woman and she needs to be a bigger part.
I think they would need to show her, but I think they could, kind of keep her off screen for a while until she just shows up. And
what about you, Rachel? Did you have any that we didn't talk about? I know I stole Edna from you.
Yeah, no, don't feel bad. I am delighted that you're so excited about Edna. Some people are like, oh yeah, that's she's cute, she's funny. And I'm like, no, she's fantastic. This is the best. It's just the whole thing. No, Edna's fantastic. One, and this is maybe just a personal thing. Wallace Shawn as the voice of Bob's boss. I forget that he's, does that bit, and then every time I watch it, I'm like, oh yeah, it's Wallace Shawn. And it's just a funny little moment.
Yeah.
To me.
Every time he was on screen, I was like, I recognize that voice. Who is that? I recognize that voice. And then finally I kept pausing because when you watch through Amazon, if you pause it, the actors who are on screen will show up. But I kept doing it in all of the wrong places, and it would only show me Craig T. Nelson and Holly Hunter. And so finally I hit it on one point, and it was Wallace Shawn, and I was like, inconceivable.
Exactly.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Because I grew up watching Princess Bride. That's and he's been in lots of other things, and I've seen him in many other things, but that's always the first thing I think of if I'm like, oh, this sounds familiar, the guy looks familiar. I mean, if you see him, I'm like, obviously, but he's done a bit of voice work, so I'll sometimes hear his voice and you'll go, oh, wait a second, and then I'm like, oh, it's that guy. It's the inconceivable guy.
We're rewatching Deep Space Nine before the Star Trek convention later in the year, and we just watched the one with him as the leader of the Ferengi, and it is basically the same thing that he's doing, but it works.
Wallace Shawn
Carve
plays
yourself a niche in this
Ferengi?
world.
Oh my gosh, I need to
Yes.
find this. I need to watch this.
It's good.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
because I remember watching that episode and going, "Wait a second, it's that guy!" And I had to convince my dad because I think I was watching it. I'm like, "It's that guy. It's the Princess Bride guy." And he's like, "No." I'm like, "That's the short, because I couldn't think of his name. It's that short guy, the inconceivable guy." And he's like, "I don't think so." And I was like, "You are so wrong." And he was wrong. Yeah, it's Wallace Shawn is just, he's like one of the classic, "Hey, it's that guys." And anytime he pops up, I just get delighted. I think that, and then the very end when Jack manifests his powers is just one of my favorite moments.
Yeah, there's a hint that he is a late bloomer compared to the other two. The fact that she's so convinced he's normal, it sort of implies Dash was already crawling really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They didn't name him Dash because he was running the womb or something, did they? Surely not.
I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, Dash was short for something.
Probably not. Dashel, I think.
Yeah.
I'd actually used his whole name at some point. Maybe I'm just making that up.
I think Dashel might be right, but yeah.
Dashel.
But it's kind of a double meaning.
But yeah, and Jack goes through not necessarily traditional superhero powers, but bringing in things from other franchises. The sort of hint of a Hellboy or what's his name, Johnny Storm from the Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then he turns solid. Is that is that I wasn't sure if that was a Silver Surfer thing or Colossal.
Colossus, I think, most likely.
Yeah, because he gets heavy.
See, and I was
So that's what I
thinking
thought
Nate
of.
from Legends.
Yeah, but I don't.
Oh yeah, him too.
Yeah.
We don't think of Nate from Legends.
Yeah, that's
Terrible,
never
terrible
in the
Nate.
times that I've seen this
Aw.
movie have I thought of Nate. And also because I think when he turns metal, he gets really heavy.
Right.
Does Nate get really heavy?
I don't know.
But yeah, I just think of Colossus,
Yeah.
X-Men. So Marvel properties?
Yeah, he's in the X-Men, I think.
Pretty much. Yeah. Because he was in Deadpool.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and that last one, I guess Hellboy would be the closest. And sometimes I'm like, what is that supposed to be? And well, it's not really supposed to necessarily be anything specific.
It definitely surprised me, though, because it's so very different than any of the other superhero powers that we saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's multiples, I guess, because Violet, I guess, has two. She's got the invisibility and the force fields.
Yeah. Which I think is
Jack.
exactly the power set of Sue Storm. Again, it's
Yeah,
so
it
like the
is.
Fantastic Four.
It is exactly the same thing. Well, even the scene when Helen is all stretched out, and opening different doors. I mean, I feel like there's a scene like that in the Fantastic Four with Reed, but I've only seen that movie one time.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, it's been a long time, and it will continue to be a long time.
Yeah, I read the what's it? 1742. Is that what that series is?
Oh, the historical one.
Yeah, the historical one. But that's the only my only comic book experience with
Okay.
the Fantastic Four. So maybe it's a combination of those, but I felt like there was something similar. Actually, reading the comic book with Reed, it's creepy. The art of Mr. Fantastic is creepy. It's weird. It makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's a strange power and probably fairly difficult to draw well.
Yeah.
I know certainly in the DC ones when they have Mr. Plastic, I think maybe, and Elongated Man. Yeah, it just they end up dominating the page because you just drawn to whatever. It's at least when you do that with Green Lantern, it's kind of an interesting color and look. But I remember one that came that had Plastic Man on the front cover, and it was just his face stretched for the entire cover, and it's a bit grotesque.
Yeah, because in this movie, when you see Helen, that doesn't bother me. It doesn't it's not upsetting to me in the way that seeing it in the comic book is.
I'm sorry, but Boat Mom was creepy AF. I'm sorry.
Okay, it was awkward. That was awkward.
I love it with her face at the front of it.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, that is weird. That was weird.
I quite like the bit where she has the look in the mirror and the sort of sigh over aging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like if this was live action or even not a children's film, they'd do a joke of her like tightening up her butt or something. But they don't. They just let it be. It's just, she's a woman who's gotten a bit older.
Still
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Matthew, what else did you like about this movie?
I do like, continue on from that, how the heroes and the villains are not necessarily complete rip-offs of what we've seen elsewhere. We have a few that you can draw some parallels to, but the names and some of the stuff we see from them are just completely, we're going to make something up. And I think that's one of the things that lends to making it feel like Watchmen, because the characters in Watchmen are generally very, very different from normal superheroes. And I'm thinking particularly Bon Voyage, because he's just ridiculous. He's ridiculous in a kind of Silver Age Batman sort of way. Just someone came up with a pun and then worked backwards from there. But I love his in his when he first comes on screen and he sees Mr. Incredible, but because he's French, Monsieur Incroyable. And they never break it. As silly as it is, they never stop him being French or acting in the way that he is supposed to as that villain.
Yeah.
Great.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the voice actor is French, but I could be wrong.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I just love that they clearly had a session of coming up with new villains and new superheroes to put on. And when she's doing that Kate bit and you see all these different people with names, I think some of them they probably had to rename. Maybe they found out like, oh no, there is someone called that.
Quite possibly.
Yeah. But it's great. And we've not really mentioned Syndrome, the main villain, Buddy. I think he's wonderful. I think he's one of the best villains in a superhero film. I've been talking again on Across the Arrowverse how I'm enjoying the current season of Flash because they're going after the Flash through human means. They're not trying to run as fast as him or trying to hit him really hard or something. They're taking him down in a very almost mundane way. And that's not what they do here, but Syndrome isn't trying to hit Mr. Incredible really hard. He's thinking it through. Okay, so I'm going to need to stop him. So what do I need to do? What do I need to design? How do I take him out? How can I then get myself to a place where I could then be considered a superhero? And sort of using human means to ape being a superhero. And I really like that it's not just about, oh, and he also got powers and he's evil. You can understand his motivation, you can understand his background and what he's doing it for.
Yeah, I think he's a really good twist on the classic, something that Mr. Incredible did X number of years ago negatively affected this character.
Mm.
Whereas, when I say classic, it's usually like, something happened and my parents died, or something happened to me that gave me powers as a direct result of something that you did and you weren't aware of it, but I decided it was your fault. So I've been harboring, anger for 15 years.
Mm.
Whereas in this case, you did a thing to me that negatively affected me emotionally, that then it motivated me. You said, no, you can't be part of my crew, basically. And I didn't like it, so I decided that I was going to use my powers for evil. And
like any good villain, he doesn't see himself as evil.
Right.
I mean, he clearly knows he's, on a not the good bit of the moral curve, but he can see his end goal and he's just working towards it through whatever means. He's not saying, he's not a classic Bond villain, like saying, and now I'm going to kill people because that's what we do.
Right. And when he even, he says, I've basically used my brain to make weapons and things that I've sold to whoever because I am the bad guy, I, do not have a moral compass. Put that out there.
Yeah.
But all very, okay, makes sense.
And I particularly love how bad he is when he tries to be a hero. When he goes in to take out the robot, and he's, he's taken out really quickly because he doesn't think through his plan. Like any villain, he doesn't, understand what he's created, what he has wrought. But just his bit of the line of "Someone needs to teach this robot some manners." What is that line? What does that even mean? It's a robot. Surely there's some sort of good robot pun or something in there.
Yeah, I don't know. I just always see it as just like an example of like he has no idea what he's doing. It's one of those, sure, I can be a superhero. I've read a comic book.
Yeah.
I watched a superhero movie, except it's not as easy as he assumes that it is. You know, how hard can it be? That's how I always read that line, you know, like.
So yes, I love Syndrome very much. He is one of the things that brings me to this film, and that's me. So before we wrap up, is there anything else we need to discuss about The Incredibles?
I have a question. And maybe I just missed it, but did they explain where Helen got the plane from?
She called in a favor.
Yeah, you missed it.
Okay. Okay. That's fair enough. It's
Basically.
entirely possible I missed it, but I was just like, all of a sudden she's on a plane. Why is she on a plane? Where did she get a plane? So, okay.
No, when she's packing, when she's packing the suit and she's like pulling that bag out and she's talking to Violet, make sure you guys do your homework and you keep an eye on the kids, whatever. And then she makes 2 phone calls, I think. She calls somebody about, I don't know, and then somebody else, but she says, I need a jet or something.
Okay.
And then it shows there's a photograph on the dresser of her and some guy in a aviator get up.
Wow, I missed a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's there. She's like, yeah, because the kids are running in and out. And there's other stuff going on.
Yeah.
She does.
Okay.
Yeah, she says, I need a plane.
So the character she calls Snug, I think his name is, that they had a whole thing that he was actually going to be co-piloting the plane with her. So he was going to be blown up when she runs back and saves the kids. And that's why,
oh my gosh.
well, that's why when it hits in the ocean, she gives it this long lingering look because she knows that her friend is going down with the plane, but there's nothing she can do at that point. But that was one of the few things that Brad Bird said, yeah, okay, that's one character too many, that's one we can take out. Because, yeah, it is also even darker than the darkness of the film.
Yeah.
I remember thinking when Syndrome started shooting at Mr. Incredible, and they were those rubber ball things instead of bullets, I was like, wow, okay, this is super less dark than I thought it was going to be. And then they covered him and basically kind of suffocated him a little bit. And I was like, nope, it's still dark.
But that's exactly like the thing. He's a good villain because he's gone, what do I need to be able to take out, potentially Mr. Incredible, the best, top hero potentially, but any hero.
Right.
Those would work. Auto-targeting, expandable, heavy, sticky balls. Yeah, that'll do it each time.
Yeah.
My other thing to discuss would be if, we have any thoughts or hopes for the sequel that's coming out later this year. Anything you'd like to see?
I was hoping it would be like another 15 years later. And it would see the evolution of the family growing up and doing something.
Yeah.
From what I've understood in researching this and seeing comments about Incredibles 2, I think it's going to follow on directly. So we'll see. I'd love to see more about Mirage, because I really liked her. I think there's an interesting thing there of whether she has powers, whether she's just a kind of Oracle computer person, something like that. But the actress who played her died, so I don't know if they're going to recast it or do something with that.
I didn't realize that.
You mentioned earlier, Rachel, about there's a different motivation for Syndrome in this. And I hope they don't go into the usual superhero syndrome of parents have died and now people are sad and angry.
Oh, yeah.
Because the film utterly avoids it, and it's better for doing that. Mm. Do you have any hopes for the sequel?
Well, I have seen, I think, one trailer, and I had hoped that it would be further forward. But at least from the trailer, looks like it takes up immediately after, unless they do some kind of prologue-y immediately after and then jump forward.
Yeah.
I would like to see, because I would like to see them a little forward with how the kids have adapted. Like, what the situation is with superheroes and how the kids have adapted, to living with both, I guess, how they're doing with their powers, or maybe even something more focused on the kids.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that would be excellent. Mandy, anything you would want more of in a sequel?
I kind of really want the sequel to be the movie that I thought The Incredibles was, which is a superhero family doing superhero things together.
Right.
I mean, it's really simple, but that's kind of what I want to see. I want to see how they interact with each other and how they learn to work with their powers together. And I think that'd be really cool.
Okay. Basically, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, but as the Incredibles.
Yeah, a little bit. And not in space.
I would also like to see Edna in sequins.
Oh, yes. Yes, I am down with that.
Sequins for Edna.
Rachel, do you have any recommendations for Mandy's list?
Well, I have a few, and of course I'm not sure. Perhaps Mandy has seen some of these. So I came prepared. If you've seen all of these, I will be super excited and very happy for you.
I've not seen all of them.
Okay, good. Good for me. Because I always wreck my brain. Like sometimes when I'm listening to an episode and you say, do you have recommendations? And I think, oh man, what would I recommend? I can never think of anything.
This is your chance. Go.
Yeah, that's my chance. So Fargo the movie.
I have not seen that.
Put that on the list. I highly recommend it. The Fifth Element.
I have seen that more than once, in fact.
Okay, good. I figured you probably had. Because I looked on the list and I thought, if it's not on the list, I'm sure that she's seen it. And this seems like something that you would have seen by now. I think is it 2012 Cabin in the Woods?
You're talking about the Joss Whedon one, right?
Yeah, the Joss Whedon
I've
one.
seen it a couple times.
You have? Okay. And then Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, no, I have not seen that one. Because that one stars does that one star the guy from Willy Wonka?
Billy Wilder, yes.
Yes.
Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder, not Billy
That's
Wilder.
his name. Yeah.
Wilder,
Okay, yeah.
Billy, no.
Yeah.
Who's Billy Wilder?
A person you just made up in your head?
An Austrian-American filmmaker, as it turns out. Of course, my friend Bill.
Okay.
Fargo and Young Frankenstein. And I think we're actually going to do an episode on Young Frankenstein on Wonking Out. We had talked about doing it last year and that didn't quite work out, so
Okay.
probably around Halloween I think we're going to do.
Excellent.
But it's a fun one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's one that I really enjoy.
They've just opened it as a stage production in London.
Oh.
Yeah.
How long is it going to be playing?
Oh, it will probably go and go. It's got some proper celebrity backing, so.
I'm hoping to make it over sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more next year than this
Okay.
year, but put that on my
There are always good shows on, so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you would like to join the conversation, you can use the hashtag PCDeprived on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Eloquent Gushing, or you can email us using podcast@eloquentgushing.com. You can find each of us on Twitter. I'm at Mandy K.
And I'm at Matthew Vose. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a lot of fun having you here. Where can people find you?
You can find my personal Twitter is Gypsy Book Nerd. My podcasts are also on Twitter at DDWcast for The Detective, The Doctor, and The Woman, and at Wonking Out for Wonking Out. And thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
Terrific. Pop Culturally Deprived is 100% funded by listeners like you through our Patreon page. Any amount you can give, even $1 a month, gives access to exclusive content, whilst also helping to support the network and our other shows. To find out more, visit patreon.com/eloquentgushing. And if you want to keep up to date with the latest news and announcements, don't forget to subscribe to the weekly newsletter on eloquentgushing.com.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of Pop Culturally Deprived, where we'll talk about the Thomas Crown affair with our friend Laura Stewart Barry. Until next time, I'm Mandy K.
And I moved the quote I was going to use.
Oh, I stole that one in the middle of the show.
You
I'm
did,
sorry.
and I
I'm
looked
sorry.
up. That was the tab I was trying to find, and now I've scrolled down on the
That's a
tab,
good
and I
one.
can't find it. And I'm going to keep waffling. I'm not editing this out, just so you know. This is staying in.
Well, we haven't had very many outtakes lately because we've just been so awesome talking to each other.
Well, this is a good one.
And when everyone's super, no one will be.
There you go.
Pop Culturally Deprived is an Eloquent Gushing production. For more information, go to eloquentgushing.com or find us on Twitter at eloquentgushing.